Welcome to today's historical deep dive, where we trade textbook timelines for immersive journeys into the minds and moments that shaped our world. We're stepping back 2 centuries to stand in the colossal yet crumbling boots of a man whose name still echoes like thunder, Napoleon Bonaparte. A figure synonymous with ambition, genius, and ultimately a fall as dramatic as his rise. Was he a liberator or a tyrant? A master strategist or a prisoner of his own ego? These aren't easy questions, and history, especially with sleepy history, isn't always comfortable. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Now, prepare to see the man and the myth stripped bare by consequence. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stand on a desolate, frozen plain. The year is 1812. The Grand Army, once the invincible hammer of Europe, a glittering force that swept aside empires, is now a ghost column of frost-bitten phantoms staggering through endless snow. Cannons lie abandoned, swallowed by drifts, silent heavy markers of a lost campaign. Men huddle around weak, struggling fires, gnawing on frozen horseflesh, their eyes hollow with despair, reflecting not defiance, but mere survival. This is not the triumphant return you envisioned just months ago, leading 500,000 men eastward into the heart of Russia, dreaming of capitulation and continental dominance. This is dissolution on an unimaginable scale, an army devoured not by enemy steel, but by the elemental wrath of a land you underestimated, a winter you dismissed with the contempt of a conqueror. The cold wind howls, a mournful, indifferent dirge, whipping at the tattered eagles on crumbling flags. You see their faces, Frenchmen, Germans, Italians, Poles, once bound by a shared dream of glory and the intoxicating belief in your destiny, unified now only by shared misery. They followed you across sun-baked plains and dusty battlefields, through moments of unparalleled glory and grinding marches, believing in the star, believing in you. Now they die by the thousands, not from Muscovite bullets or Cossack lances, but from the slow, agonizing surrender to ice and starvation. The Cossacks, elusive and cruel, appear like phantoms from the white haze, picking off the weak, harrying the flanks of this dying beast. This vast, white silence is the ultimate auditor, revealing, brutally, the fatal flaw in the grandest design, the human cost of unchecked ambition, the consequence of believing in your own invincibility. It was here, in this frozen hell, that the principle of imperial hubris met its most brutal, irrefutable consequence. Ask yourself, standing here amidst the frozen dead, was this the price of strategic brilliance stretching too far, or simply monumental, unforgivable hubris? To understand this ruin, you must rewind. Where did the seed of such catastrophic overreach truly take root? Was it in the dazzling victories of your youth, where speed, audacity, and sheer genius seemed to bend reality to your will? You remember Italy, 1796. The Army of Italy is a ghost of a force, a ragtag collection of 30,000 men, demoralized, unpaid, and hungry. They stand opposed to multiple larger, richer Austrian and Piedmontese forces, a combined enemy numbering closer to 70,000. The Directory in Paris sees this front as a mere diversion, a sideshow to the main event happening in Germany. But you, The newly appointed commander at 26 see a chessboard ripe for audacious play. You arrive like a tempest. Your initial proclamations to the troops are electric, raw promises of glory, honor, and abundance in the fertile plains of Italy. Soldiers, you are naked, ill-fed. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. It's half truth, half myth. Entirely captivating. And then you move. Not where they expect, not how they expect. You surge between the Austrian and Piedmontese armies, a wedge driven by lightning speed. The textbook strategy of the era is slow, cautious maneuver, preserving lines of communication. You discard the textbook. Your army marches faster than anyone thought possible, subsisting on what they can seize, driving through mountain passes and across rivers with relentless fury. Montagnat, Millesimo, Dago, Mondovi. Battles blur into a stunning sequence of victories within weeks. You isolate the Piedmontese, force them to sue for peace, seizing fortresses and dictating terms like a seasoned emperor, not a young general on a side mission. The Austrians, reeling, try to recover, but you anticipate their movements, hitting them at Lodi, at Castiglione, at Arcole, at Rivoli. At Lodi, you personally rally troops under fire to cross a bridge, a moment cemented in legend and your own mind. It wasn't just victory, it was personal validation, a shared act of defying death that bound your soldiers to you with iron loyalty. You felt the thrill of seizing the initiative, of dictating terms, of proving that sheer will and intellect could overcome brute force and entrenched tradition. You weren't just defeating armies. You were shattering empires, redrawing maps with astonishing speed. The wealth of Italy flowed back to Paris, silencing critics and cementing your indispensable value. This was the crucible where you learned the potent, intoxicating power of perceived invincibility. You saw that momentum, audacious movement, and never showing weakness could make an army feel and often become unstoppable. It taught you that reality was not a fixed entity, but something you can sculpt with speed and decisiveness. But here lies a subtle, perhaps tragic irony. This campaign also taught you to disregard the immense cost, the logistical strain, the human suffering left in the wake of such speed. It built a faith in the gamble, in the belief that your will could always impose order on chaos. You conquered Italy, yes, but you also, perhaps, conquered a part of yourself, burying caution under layers of dazzling success. Ask yourself, looking back, was this period pure, unadulterated brilliance, or the first intoxicating taste of hubris, a lesson learned too well? What limits did you fail to see, rushing across those Italian plains? You are young, stepping onto French soil, a boy from Corsica, barely speaking the language without that thick provincial accent. The air at Brienne Military School is crisp, but the atmosphere is colder, filled with the hushed judgment of your peers. They are the sons of France's elite, polished, privileged, dismissive. You are the outsider. Your clothes are plain, your resources meager. They laugh at your name, your background, the very sound of your voice. Every sneer, every exclusion, every reminder that you don't belong lands like a physical blow. But these aren't just slights. They are fuel. They ignite a fire in your gut that will burn for decades. This isn't merely about learning tactics or rising through the ranks. It's about proving them wrong. It's a defiant internal declaration. You will not be dismissed. You will not be forgotten. You will rise so high they will have to crane their necks to see you. Ambition isn't just a career goal. It's a shield against their scorn, a weapon forged in the fires of indignity, a desperate, necessary path to validation in a world that wants to keep you small. Alone in your Spartan room, while others chase frivolous pursuits, you devour books with a hunger that seems almost pathological. History, philosophy, mathematics, the great campaigns of antiquity. They are not just subjects. They are blueprints, strategies, a secret language of power and possibility. You are building an inner fortress of knowledge, a complex strategy game played out in your mind, preparing for a chance you feel with absolute certainty will come. You are not hoping for opportunity. You are expecting it, meticulously arming yourself for its arrival. This early ambition, born from the potent mix of intellectual brilliance and profound insecurity, is raw, focused, almost pure in its intensity. It isn't yet stained by the compromises of power, the weight of empire. It is the engine firing up, the initial spark that will illuminate a path leading to unimaginable heights, a path paved with intellect and driven by the relentless need to show the world and yourself that the boy they mocked was destined to reshape their reality. Ask yourself, does ambition born of such deep-seated need make a leader more driven or ultimately more fragile? The searing sun of Egypt beats down. You stand before the pyramids, colossal stones that have witnessed millennia. This is the crucible where image and reality will begin their long, dangerous dance. The Egyptian campaign, militarily, is fraught with peril. The fleet supporting you will soon be annihilated by Nelson at the Nile, leaving you effectively stranded. But even in strategic failure, you see opportunity. You are not just a general leading troops. You are a storyteller, a mythmaker on history's grandest stage. At the Battle of the Pyramids, your tactics are brilliant, deploying your seasoned infantry in massive squares to repel the Mamluk cavalry charges. But it's not just the military formation that matters, it's the accompanying narrative. As your soldiers prepare to face their ancient foe, you address them with words designed not just to inspire, but to immortalize. Soldiers, you declare, gesturing towards the silent giants. From the height of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. This isn't just a battlefield speech, it's a piece of carefully crafted propaganda. You are explicitly linking your campaign, your destiny, to the grandeur of ancient history, casting yourself as a figure of epochal significance. You understand intuitively what few leaders before you did: the power of controlling the narrative, of shaping your image, not just on the field, but in the public mind back in France. You didn't just win battles, you staged them, you reported them, you marketed them. Back home, the public receives carefully curated dispatches painting a picture of triumphant exploration and military glory, largely omitting the logistical nightmares, the harsh realities, the strategic dead end the campaign was becoming. This deliberate construction of your own legend becomes a critical tool. It fuels the myth of the visionary leader, the man of destiny, capable of bridging the gritty reality of warfare with the sweeping panorama of history. It solidifies your hold on the popular imagination. Yet, here lies the tragic irony, the subtle wit of fate. This masterful self-marketing, this blurring of the lines between the brilliant general and the infallible demigod you present yourself as, also becomes a dangerous trap. You begin to believe your own press, confusing the carefully constructed image with the complex, fallible human being beneath. Ask yourself, was this supreme strategic foresight in understanding public perception, or the first, insidious whispers of the hubris that would one day blind you? What would it take to truly see clearly again once the legend starts to overshadow the man? The air in Paris crackles, thick with discontent. France, bleeding from revolutionary fervor and crippled by the Directory's corruption, lies exhausted. A vacuum opens, a gaping maw where order and strong leadership should be. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, returned from Egypt, your military star still blazing in the public mind, a hero forged in fire, unaware that the political arena is a beast entirely different from the battlefield. You see the desperation, the aching void waiting to be filled. This is not a plan years in the making. It's an opportunity presenting itself, raw and demanding. A moment arrives, the coup of 18 Brumaire. You don't march armies, you navigate legislative halls, a place far removed from the dust and glory of Marengo or Lodi. It is less a triumphant charge, more a clumsy, desperate grapple. You enter the Council of 500, expecting acclamation, perhaps a formal request to save the Republic. Instead, shouts of "Down with the tyrant! Down with the dictator!" erupt. The deputies surge towards you. You stumble, momentarily overwhelmed, even physically assaulted. Panic, cold and sharp, pricks at the edges of your composure. This legendary general, master of the battlefield, is momentarily lost in a civilian riot. But then, instinct takes over. Your brother Lucien, chairman of the council, saves the day, riding out to the waiting troops and dramatically declaring the deputies terrorists, calling on the soldiers to clear the hall. Your grenadiers enter, bayonets fixed, dispersing the lawmakers. It is crude, messy, profoundly un-Napoleonic in its execution compared to your military precision. Yet, it works. Through a blend of military threat, political maneuvering, and sheer audacious bluff, the Directory is dissolved. You emerge, not as general, but as first consul. This wasn't a battle won by strategy. It was a political conquest secured by reputation and nerve. It teaches you a crucial, chilling lesson. The final, decisive step in ambition often requires you to step beyond your domain of established expertise. Your military fame provided the leverage, the public image of the necessary strongman. But the actual power grab demanded navigating the treacherous waters of political conspiracy and using force not against a foreign enemy, but against your own government. Ask yourself, what level of risk are you willing to take when the prize is ultimate power, when the leap required feels like falling into the unknown? The deep insight here is that past success builds the platform, but the audacity to jump is personal. The danger, however, is profound and seductive, believing that because you mastered one game, you inherently understand the rules of all others. You stand now, first consul, having seized the reins, not through election or inheritance, but by exploiting chaos, leveraging fame, and making a desperate, fumbling, yet ultimately successful leap. December 2nd, 1804. Notre Dame Cathedral. The air is thick with incense, history, and the weight of a continent watching. You stand center stage, not merely a participant, but the architect of this grand theater. Pope Pius VII is here, brought from Rome, a guest, albeit an important one, in a ceremony you orchestrate. He expects to perform the ancient rite, to bestow God's blessing through the Church, to place the symbols of power upon your head. But you have other plans. You are not Louis XVI, born to rule by divine right. You are Napoleon Bonaparte, forged in the crucible of revolution, propelled by merit, ambition, and the roar of cannons at Lodi and Marengo. Your authority doesn't descend from heaven. It ascends from the will of the French people, carefully guided, of course, and the undeniable force of your victories. The moment arrives, a hush falls. You step forward, not waiting. With deliberate, powerful movement, you take the heavy golden laurel wreath, already transformed into the imperial crown. It's not handed to you, it's taken. And then, with eyes fixed forward, you place it upon your own head. This isn't just breaking protocol. It's shattering 1,000 years of European tradition. It's a declaration, louder than any trumpet fanfare, echoing through the vaulted ceilings of Notre Dame and across the courts of Europe. You are not crowned by God, nor by his representative on earth. You are crowned by yourself, for yourself, a man who rose from obscurity to command an empire. Your power is autogenous, self-generated, owing allegiance only to your own ambition and the strength you command. It is the ultimate act of the self-made man, claiming his ultimate reward. Next, you turn to Josephine, kneeling beside you, her future inextricably linked to the empire you have just proclaimed. You lift the smaller diadem and crown her empress, a moment of calculated tenderness, perhaps, but also another assertion. Even your closest partner receives her station through you, from your hand. This act solidifies your image as the ultimate master of your destiny, the force majeure of your age. The lesson is stark and compelling, the potent, almost intoxicating allure of absolute autonomy, of believing you and you alone hold the keys to your success and legitimacy. But ask yourself, standing in the echo of that defiant moment, at what point does such profound confidence in self become isolation? When does the belief that you alone possess the necessary vision deafen you to counsel, blind you to dissent, and set you on a solitary path where your own brilliance is the only map? The crown is on your head, placed by your own hand, a symbol not just of power, but perhaps of a solitude that would ultimately define the limits of that power. You stand on the Pratzen Heights, the air thin and biting in the pre-dawn chill of December 2nd, 1805. Below, the Allied army, a massive serpent of men and cannons, uncoils exactly as you predicted. Your feint worked. They believed your flank was weak, ripe for the plucking, and have stripped their center to reinforce it. You watch the dense fog swirling in the valleys, a poled cloak hiding the true deployment of your grand army. This is your stage, Austerlitz, and the enemy dances to your tune. You know this ground better than the generals who now lead their men across it. You walked these hills, studied these frozen ponds, understood how the mist clung to the lowlands. You envisioned this battle days ago, perhaps even weeks. Not just the broad strokes, but the timing, the movement, the moment. You pulled back your forces on the right flank, luring the Allies into the low ground, convincing them of your vulnerability. It feels less like strategy and more like destiny unfolding according to a script you wrote yourself. As the first rays of sun pierce the fog, illuminating the battlefield in a golden ethereal light, the son of Austerlitz, you give the order. Your marshals, Soult, Davout, Lannes, unleashed. They strike directly at the now weakened Allied center on the Pratzen Heights. It is a hammer blow of unparalleled force and precision. Men surge uphill through the dissipating mist, bayonets fixed, artillery tearing gaps in the enemy lines. The Allied commanders, realizing their fatal error, tried desperately to pull units back from the flanks, but it's too late. Your reserve, the Imperial Guard, stands ready to deliver the final crushing weight. The battle becomes a rout. Units are shattered, commanders captured, men drown attempting to cross frozen ponds under artillery fire. It is not just a victory. It is an annihilation of two emperors' combined armies by a single emperor's will. You predicted their every significant move, exploited the terrain with ruthless efficiency, and demonstrated a level of strategic foresight that seemed almost supernatural. This isn't just triumph, it's vindication on the grandest scale. The whispers of Corsican upstart are drowned out by the roars of Emperor of the French, and even the most skeptical monarchs in Europe now acknowledge the terrifying brilliance seated on the throne in Paris. The feeling is intoxicating. Kings write you humbled letters. Empires sue for peace. The very concept of defeat seems distant, unreal. Austerlitz cements your legend, not just as a conqueror, but as the military genius of the age. The world trembles, and within you, something shifts. The strategic confidence, the carefully cultivated image of invincibility presented to the world, solidifies into a deep internal conviction. You are untouchable. You cannot lose. This battle was not just a result of brilliant planning, meticulous execution, and perhaps a touch of fortune. It was, surely, proof of your inherent, singular greatness. Here lies the subtle, insidious danger. When every major gamble pays off spectacularly, when your enemies seem to make the exact mistakes you anticipate, it becomes easy to attribute success solely to your own genius. Dismissing the complex interplay of factors, the competence of your troops, the dedication of your officers, yes, but also the specific errors of the enemy, the unpredictable fog that shielded your advance, the sheer brutal luck of war. Austerlitz validates your principles so profoundly that it lays the foundation for an almost divine self-belief. This is the moment where confidence, necessary for leadership, begins its perilous ascent towards the dizzying, treacherous heights of hubris. It is a dangerous lesson to learn that the sun will always shine on your endeavors simply because you command it. Ask yourself, was the perfection of Austerlitz proof of ultimate genius, or the dangerous beginning of a delusion of infallibility? What would you guard against after such a world-altering success? Following Austerlitz, Jena, Auerstedt, the battlefield gives way to the map room. You stand before a massive, unfurled chart of Europe, not as a general planning the next attack, but as a sculptor with nations as clay. You don't just conquer territory, you reimagine the continent itself. The ancient, sprawling structure of the Holy Roman Empire, with a stroke of your pen, it ceases to exist after 1,000 years. A bureaucratic phantom, perhaps, but its dissolution sends shivers through royal houses that had held onto their lineage since the dawn of modern Europe. In its place, you forge the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of German states bound to Paris, a strategic buffer and a source of troops. You are not asking for alliances, you are dictating allegiance. Then you look to the thrones, Naples, Holland, Westphalia, Spain. You install your brothers, your sisters, your stepson. You are creating a dynastic web, attempting to anchor your power not just through military might, but through blood and engineered legitimacy. You see Europe not as a collection of independent states with their own histories and rights, but as pieces on a grand chessboard, to be moved, traded, and reorganized according to your strategic and personal will. This is less about defense and more about absolute control. A unified system under your oversight. Treaties are signed, but they are your terms, non-negotiable ultimatums delivered to humbled emperors and kings. You impose your legal codes, your administrative systems, your vision of a rationalized, modern state onto societies steeped in tradition. You are the architect of a new European order, a grand, unprecedented project of social and political engineering on a scale previously unimaginable. It's an intoxicating transformation, from the revolutionary who destroyed the old Bastille to the emperor building a continental empire. The power is immense, total, and with such power comes a dangerous shift in perspective. Dissent from conquered peoples, murmurs from unwilling allies, they become not valid concerns, but merely inconvenient noise. Static you can simply ignore or suppress. External realities that don't fit your grand design, local customs, national identities, economic friction, are viewed not as complex factors, but as obstacles to be bulldozed away. The checks and balances that restrain ordinary leaders, the need for consent, the respect for established norms, you feel increasingly exempt from them. You are not merely a man ruling nations. You are the force of destiny, reshaping the world. This period reveals not just the reach of your authority, but the growing, almost overwhelming temptation to believe you are above the limitations that bind all others. Ask yourself, when does the vision of a new order cross the line into the delusion of invincibility? After Trafalgar, the vast, unyielding power of the Royal Navy became an insurmountable wall. The sea lanes, once pathways for ambition, were now the exclusive domain of your most persistent enemy, Island Britain. Unable to strike directly at her heart, a new strategy took root, a plan born of necessity and a searing frustration. The continental system. You declared total economic war, a grand decree echoing across Europe, forbidding any port under your influence from trading with Britain. On paper, it was a masterpiece of strategic logic, a seemingly foolproof method to starve the industrial giant, to cripple her commerce and force her to her knees without firing a single shot across the channel. It was a test of wills waged not with cannon fire, but with ledger books and trade routes. You envisioned a continent united under your banner, a closed economic bloc where Britain withered in isolation. But this grand design held a fatal flaw, a catastrophic blind spot. It ignored the inconvenient, messy realities of human nature, the stubborn facts of geography, and the intricate, vital complexities of commerce that transcended national borders. Reality, it turned out, refused to be legislated. Smuggling became an art form, a thriving black market economy that undermined your decrees at every turn. Goods Britain produced or needed found their way through hidden coves, along mountain passes, across countless rivers. A relentless tide bypassing your every command. This wasn't just illicit trade, it was a symptom of a deeper malaise. The blockade hurt the continental economies as much, often more, than it did Britain. Merchants went bankrupt, industries lacked raw materials, consumers craved banned goods. Resentment simmered and boiled over, not just among the vanquished or the distant, but among your own allies, your own subjects, who saw their livelihoods sacrificed on the altar of your anti-British obsession. This wasn't brilliance, it was dogma, a refusal to see that even the most powerful will cannot simply redefine economic laws or suppress fundamental human needs and desires for profit and goods. You tried to cage the wind, to command the tides of trade. The continental system became a straitjacket, not just for Britain, but for the continent you controlled. It was a strategic misstep, born less of foresight and more of pride, and a refusal to admit that some problems, like invading an island power with naval supremacy or controlling every economic transaction across an entire continent, were beyond even your reach. This rigid adherence to a failing plan sowed seeds of future crisis, driving allies like Tsar Alexander of Russia to eventually defy you, setting the stage for the catastrophic campaigns to come. Ask yourself, was this the act of a strategic genius adapting to circumstance, or the stubborn folly of a man who had forgotten how to acknowledge limits? What happens when even brilliant logic crashes against the simple reality of people wanting to buy and sell, and geographies too vast to control? Spain. You turn your gaze southwards towards the Iberian Peninsula, a land steeped in tradition and fiery faith. The Bourbon monarchy there feels weak, tied to Britain, an obstacle. You make a decisive move. You depose King Charles IV and his heir, Fernando, and install your own brother, Joseph, on the Spanish throne. You expect compliance, even gratitude, from a nation you believe will welcome modern reforms. You see a strategic necessity, a logical extension of your continental system. What you receive instead is a brutal, visceral shock. This isn't a battle line you can break with massed artillery and disciplined charges. This is an entire nation rising up. Every town, every village, every mountain pass becomes a potential ambush site. The Spanish people, intensely proud of their heritage and fiercely devout, see your act not as liberation, but as sacrilege and foreign occupation. They fight with a ferocity you haven't truly reckoned with before, not in the structured wars against other European powers. This is guerrilla war, the little war, fought by peasants, priests, and partisans, not professional soldiers. It becomes a festering wound, an ulcer that begins to drain the very lifeblood of your empire. Hundreds of thousands of your finest veterans, troops you desperately need elsewhere, are tied down, slowly bled away in skirmishes, sieges, and massacres. Resources flow south into a bottomless pit. And aiding this stubborn resistance is the quiet, methodical general, Arthur Wellesley, soon to be known as Wellington, leading British forces from Portugal, providing a conventional anchor for the Spanish fury. You dismiss it. You call them bandits, brigands, fanatics. You cannot grasp that this isn't about tactics or strategy. It's about identity, faith, and the simple, unyielding will of a people who refuse to be ruled by a foreigner, even your brother. This is a catastrophic miscalculation, perhaps one of your greatest. It's a clear signal that your writ, enforced by bayonets and decrees, does not run everywhere. There are limits to imposing your will, especially when it clashes head-on with a nation's soul. Ask yourself, was this blindness? How could the master strategist, the man who remade Europe, so utterly misunderstand the force of popular resistance, of national pride? The bitter irony is that your past successes, your astonishing string of victories that proved armies could break empires, created a dangerous tunnel vision. You expected others to fold or conform to the patterns you understood. You failed to see that this fight in Spain didn't conform. It was a new kind of war, fueled by something you didn't value: the collective will of ordinary people defending their home. You underestimated the Spanish people, and Spain became the quicksand that began to swallow your empire whole. The fragile peace forged on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River, the grand bargain struck at Tilsit, where you and Tsar Alexander I divided the world, is crumbling. You saw it coming, perhaps chose not to see it fully. Your relationship with Alexander, once marked by a strange, almost theatrical camaraderie, has curdled. It began as a geopolitical calculation. Two emperors acknowledging each other's spheres, carving up influence like grand masters, moving pieces on a continental board. But the alliance, a handshake across a river that promised stability, couldn't withstand the rising tide of competing interests and, more dangerously, wounded pride. The continental system, your economic weapon aimed at Britain, was a blunt instrument that bruised everyone, especially Russia. Its ports choked, its merchants suffered, and its economy faltered under the weight of blockading British trade. Alexander felt the pressure from his nobles, who relied on exports. And he began to waver, granting licenses for neutral ships that were thinly disguised British vessels. To you, this wasn't just a policy deviation. It was a betrayal of the pact, a crack in the unified front you demanded against your oldest enemy. Then came Poland, your creation of the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, a Polish statelet carved from Prussian and Austrian territory, was a constant irritant to Russia. Alexander feared a revival of the Polish kingdom, a historical adversary right on his border. He demanded guarantees it would never happen, guarantees you were unwilling to give, seeing Poland as a potential buffer or even a springboard. Your ambitions in the East felt threateningly close to his domain. These were the fundamental stresses: economic pain, strategic anxieties, underlying distrust. But the spark that ignited the powder keg? A minor, almost petty dispute over the small German duchy of Oldenburg, whose duke was Alexander's brother-in-law. When you annexed Oldenburg as part of enforcing the continental system, Alexander saw it not just as another strategic move, but as a personal insult, a blatant disregard for his family ties and prestige. You, in turn, viewed his angry reaction as disproportionate, a sign of his increasing resistance to your will, a challenge to your authority. This is where the geopolitical transformed into the intensely personal. When you stand at the apex of power, when your identity is so intertwined with the state you command, policy disagreements cease to be abstract points of negotiation. They become direct affronts. Alexander's defiance felt like a personal challenge to you, Napoleon. Your ego, vast and accustomed to bending emperors and kingdoms to its will, felt stung by his wavering commitment, his pushback. The Oldenburg affair, a mere footnote in the grand scheme of European power struggles, became a flashpoint precisely because it was interpreted through the lens of personal pride and perceived disrespect. You saw Alexander's actions not as the maneuvering of a sovereign protecting his national interests under duress, but as a personal betrayal by a man you thought was your partner, perhaps even your subordinate in the Tilsit arrangement. Your response wasn't just about forcing Russia back into line economically. It was about reasserting your dominance, reminding Alexander and the world who held the ultimate authority. The decision to invade Russia wasn't solely a strategic blunder driven by overconfidence. It was also fueled by a profound sense of wounded pride, an unwillingness to tolerate defiance from someone you had treated as an equal, perhaps even a younger sibling in the imperial family. Ask yourself, when does a leader's conviction calcify into stubborn pride? When does strategic calculation dissolve into personal vendetta? The higher you climb, the more your sense of self merges with the destiny of nations. But this blurring can be fatal. The slight felt by an emperor became the casus belli for a campaign that would cost hundreds of thousands of lives and ultimately unravel an empire. A personal slight is a terrible foundation for national policy, a dangerous whisper in the ear of power that can deafen you to the cold logic of survival. And so, it builds towards Russia, 1812. You stand at the precipice of the continent, gazing east, assembling a force the likes of which the world has never witnessed. Over 500,000 men gather under your banners. Not just French, but Germans, Poles, Italians, Dutch, Swiss, a tapestry woven from the furthest reaches of your dominion. It is the Grande Armée, a machine of unparalleled scale, a testament to your singular power to command resources, loyalty, or at least absolute obedience. You orchestrate their movement with the precision of a master clockmaker. Every regiment, every battalion, every supply wagon positioned with meticulous care. This is your ultimate instrument, honed by years of campaigns, now pointed at the stubborn heart of the Tsar, who dares defy your continental system. You believe a swift campaign is all it will take. One decisive battle, perhaps two, a crushing blow to force Alexander back into line, to reaffirm your undisputed authority over Europe.